You don't really notice the moment life starts weighing on you. It just happens. One day, you're a kid running through sprinklers in the summer, laughing until your stomach hurts, and the next, you're 29, standing in a cramped kitchen at 6 in the morning, clutching a cup of coffee like it's the last thing tethering you to the world. That's me. Emily Carter. Nurse practitioner, fixer of everything, and, apparently, the glue that holds this mess of a family together. The apartment was quiet except for the faint hum of the fridge and the soft tap-tap of rain against the window. Chicago mornings always seemed to carry a kind of heaviness, like the city itself hadn't quite woken up yet. I liked those early hours. They were mine. No calls from my sister, no guilt trips from Mom, no shift at the clinic hanging over my head, just me, my thoughts, and that bitter, too strong coffee. But peace never lasted long. My phone buzzed against the counter. I didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. Rachel. My sister's name flashed like a warning light. I ignored it. I finished my coffee, grabbed my worn-out bag from the hook by the door, and tried to shake off the dread curling in my stomach. The walk to the clinic wasn't long, but every step felt like I was dragging 100 invisible burdens with me. Bills stacked on the kitchen table, Mom's medical appointments circled in angry red ink on the calendar, Rachel's endless parade of, "I just need a little help, it's important, I swear." The clinic smelled like antiseptic and stale air, the kind of place where exhaustion settled into your bones by the end of the first hour. I clocked in, tied my hair back, and got to work. The hours slipped by in a blur of patients, charts, and that familiar, nagging feeling that no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. It wasn't until lunch that I checked my phone again. 3 missed calls. A text. It's urgent. Please. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. I didn't respond right away. I just stared at the message, jaw tight, fingers itching to throw the phone across the break room. Urgent. Rachel's definition of urgent usually translated to, "I need money for some networking event that's basically a rooftop party where she takes selfies with influencers." But what if, just this once, it was serious? By the time my shift ended, the guilt had done its job. I called her back. Finally, Rachel's voice rushed through the speaker, too bright, too eager, like she was trying to sound casual but couldn't quite pull it off. "Listen, I wouldn't bother you if it wasn't important." Cut to the chase, Rachel. "What do you need?" There was a pause. Just long enough for that familiar ache to settle in my chest, the one that made me remember the little sister who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, clutching her stuffed rabbit and whispering that she was scared. "It's just, I need some help covering rent this month. Things have been tight, and this gig I lined up fell through last minute. I swear I'll pay you back as soon as I can." I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes. "How much?" Just 1,000. "I'll pay you back, You know I will." She never did. But the words came out of my mouth anyway, flat and automatic. "I'll transfer it tonight." "You're the best." "Seriously, I don't know what I'd do without you." That was the problem. I didn't think she wanted to know. I hung up without saying goodbye. My hands were shaking. Not with anger, not even with frustration anymore, just this tired, hollow feeling that had burrowed so deep into me, I couldn't remember what it felt like not to carry it. When I got home that night, Mom was asleep on the couch, a blanket pulled up to her chin, soft snoring filling the space. She looked peaceful, almost fragile under the flickering light of the TV. I transferred the money before I could talk myself out of it. And as I sat there in the dark, staring at the glow of my phone screen, one thought kept circling in my mind. How much longer can I keep doing this? Some mornings, you wake up and feel like maybe, just maybe, things will get better. There's this fragile, stupid little hope that creeps in, like a warm draft through a cracked window. That morning felt like one of those rare moments. The sun was actually shining for once, cutting through the gray Chicago sky like it had something to prove. I made myself a real breakfast: eggs, toast, even splurged on a slice of avocado, like I was trying to convince myself I had things under control. It was ridiculous, of course. I didn't even sit down to eat it, just shoveled food into my mouth while scrolling through emails on my phone. And then it happened, an email that made me stop mid-bite, the fork dangling uselessly in my hand. It was from Dr. Morrison, my supervisor at the clinic. Short and to the point, like always. "Emily, there's an opportunity one think you should consider. We're looking for someone to assist with a new research project on chronic illness treatment. It's a big commitment, but it could be huge for your career. Let's talk soon." I just stared at the screen for a minute, heart thudding against my ribs like it wasn't sure if it should speed up or just give up altogether. A big commitment. I knew what that meant: long hours, extra responsibilities, late nights of data analysis and writing reports. It was the kind of opportunity I'd worked toward for years, the kind of thing that could finally push me forward instead of keeping me stuck in the same exhausted routine. But there was Rachel. And Mom. And every little piece of my life that screamed, "Not now, you can't afford to be selfish." I shoved the phone back in my bag and tried to pretend that email didn't exist. The day dragged on in a blur of patients, prescriptions, and forced smiles. I told myself I'd think about it later. I was good at that, putting things off, pretending they weren't clawing at the edges of my thoughts. By the time my shift ended, my head was pounding, and all I wanted was to go home, crawl into bed, and forget about the endless grind of responsibilities. But fate, or whatever sick sense of humor the universe had other plans. I ran into Laura just outside the clinic. It had been years since I'd last seen her, since high school, actually. Back then, she was the kind of friend who knew everything about you, the one who showed up at your door with ice cream after a breakup and made you laugh until your stomach hurt. But life happened, like it always does, and we drifted apart without ever meaning to. "Emily?" Her voice was soft, uncertain, like she wasn't sure if it was really me. I turned, and there she was, older, sure, but still Laura. Same warm smile, same kind eyes. "Laura? Wow, it's been, God, how long?" "Too long," she said, pulling me into a quick hug. "How've you been? You look tired." She winced, like she regretted the honesty as soon as it left her mouth. "Yeah, well, life's been a lot," I said, trying to sound casual, like I wasn't drowning most days. We talked for a bit, small talk, the kind that feels both comforting and strange after so many years apart. She worked in marketing now, lived in the city with her fiancé, had a dog that apparently hated squirrels more than anything on earth. Normal, easy things. Things that didn't come with the weight of sacrifice. And then she said it, like a bomb, dropped without warning. "I saw Rachel the other day. Well, not in person, but, on Instagram. She looks like she's living her best life. All those trips and designer clothes, seriously, she must be killing it." I felt something twist in my stomach, tight and ugly. "Yeah," I managed to say, voice flat and dry. "She's doing fine." But the words echoed wrong inside me, sharp and bitter. Because I knew Rachel wasn't killing it. I knew she didn't have some secret career breakthrough that paid for fancy clothes or overpriced cocktails at rooftop bars. I was killing myself with extra shifts to make sure she didn't drown, and she was posting pictures on some beach with a caption like, "Living my best life." By the time I got home, the seed of doubt had already started to grow, curling around my thoughts like ivy. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed with my laptop open, hands trembling just slightly as I logged into my bank account. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to know. But curiosity mixed with dread is a powerful thing. And there it was, Withdrawal after withdrawal, all labeled with vague descriptions that meant nothing. Transfer, payment, urgent need. Thousands of dollars. Month after month. I felt cold all over, like the air around me had turned to ice. My sister, my own sister, had been bleeding me dry while she flaunted a life I couldn't even dream of. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry, just empty, like something inside me had finally snapped loose and drifted out of reach. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, one question kept whispering through my head, over and over, until sleep finally dragged me under. How long has she been lying to me? It's funny how silence can feel loud when your mind won't stop screaming. That's how it was for me, lying there in the dark, surrounded by nothing but the soft creak of old pipes and the distant hum of traffic outside, while my thoughts clawed at me from the inside like they were trying to escape. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Just stared at the ceiling, counting cracks in the plaster like they might somehow hold the answer to how I had been so blind for so long. Morning came like a slap, too bright, too real. The sun poured in through the thin curtains, and the first thing I felt wasn't exhaustion. It was anger. Not a raging, fiery kind of anger, but cold and sharp, like ice settling into my veins. I knew what I had to do. No more avoiding it. No more pretending. I waited until that evening, when I knew Rachel would be home and Mom would be around. This wasn't the kind of thing you did over the phone or in passing. It needed to happen face to face, no matter how much the thought of it made my stomach twist into knots. The living room was quiet when I got there, too quiet. Mom was on the couch, wrapped in that same old blanket she always used, eyes glued to the TV, even though it was clear she wasn't really watching anything. Just existing in that fog she'd been stuck in for years. Rachel sat across the room, scrolling through her phone like the world couldn't touch her. "Can we talk?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. Rachel glanced up, lazily, like she didn't have a care in the world. Now? Now, I cut her off. My tone left no room for argument. That got her attention. Mom turned her head slowly, eyes dull but curious, like she already sensed something was wrong but didn't have the energy to brace for it. I sat down on the edge of the coffee table, close enough to see Rachel's fake confidence crack just a little. "I need to know the truth, Rachel." "About the money." She blinked, too quickly. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. My thumb hovered over the screen, and for a second, I hesitated. Part of me still didn't want to believe it, didn't want to be that sister. But the facts were right there, cold and undeniable. I went through my statements, I said, voice low, almost too calm. Thousands of dollars, month after month. And then I saw this. I shoved my phone toward her, showing a screenshot from her Instagram, the one Laura had mentioned. Rachel poolside, drink in hand, sunglasses worth more than my entire paycheck, captioned with some meaningless quote about living your best life. Her face went pale, and that was all the confirmation I needed. "Emily," Mom said weakly from the couch, but I didn't look at her. I couldn't, not yet. "Tell me I'm wrong, Rachel. Tell me those weren't my sacrifices paying for your designer shoes and your fancy brunches." For a moment, she tried to hold on to her usual bravado, that little smirk she always wore like armor. But it cracked fast, faster than I thought it would. "It wasn't like that," she muttered, voice barely above a whisper. I needed it, okay? I thought if I looked successful, people would take me seriously. You don't get it, I'm trying to build something for myself." I stared at her, and all I could think was how dare you? How dare she dress up her selfishness as ambition, as if lying and bleeding me dry was some necessary step toward success. "You lied to me," I said, and my voice broke on the last word because it wasn't just about the money. It was about every time I picked up her calls at 2 a.m., Every time I had said yes when I wanted to say no. Every time I carried the weight of this family on my shoulders because no one else would. Rachel's eyes shimmered with guilt, or maybe just the fear of getting caught, but she didn't say anything. And then Mom, spoke up, her voice weak and fragile. "Emily, please," she didn't mean. I turned to her so fast it made my head spin. Don't defend her. I've been paying off your medical bills, keeping this house afloat, and while I was drowning in responsibility, she was out there playing pretend with my money. How can you excuse that?" The room went so still it felt like the air had frozen. Rachel's bravado was gone, replaced with something raw, maybe shame, maybe regret, but it didn't matter. I took a deep breath, studying myself. "You owe me, Rachel. $47,000. I don't care how long it takes, you will pay me back." Her mouth opened like she wanted to argue, but I didn't let her. "If you don't, I'll take legal action." The words felt foreign in my mouth, like they belonged to someone stronger, someone who didn't feel like falling apart. "I'm done being your safety net." The silence that followed was thick and ugly. Mom sat there, stunned and small, while Rachel just stared at me like she didn't even recognize the person in front of her. But I recognized myself. For the first time in a long time, I knew exactly who I was, and what I deserved. Without waiting for anyone to respond, I grabbed my bag and left. The cold air outside hit me like a wave, sharp and cleansing. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just kept walking, one foot in front of the other, until the anger faded into something quieter. Something closer to peace. It's strange how silence feels different when it's yours alone. After everything, after the shouting, the accusations, the cold, sharp finality of my words, I expected to feel something. Relief, maybe. Satisfaction. But mostly, what I felt was empty. Not hollow in that dramatic, heartbroken kind of way, just tired. Bone-deep, soul-heavy tiredness that didn't go away, no matter how many hours of sleep I tried to catch up on. But life doesn't stop when you need a break. It just keeps rolling forward, indifferent to whether you're ready or not. The next few weeks were a blur of movement. I threw myself into work like it was the only thing tethering me to solid ground. Extra shifts, late nights, stacks of paperwork, and patients who needed me to be calm, capable, and compassionate. There wasn't space to think about Rachel, about Mom, or about the crater-sized hole left behind after that night. And then came the project. I remember sitting in Dr. Morrison's cramped office, hands clasped tightly in my lap as he explained the details. It was a research initiative focused on chronic illness management, real, groundbreaking stuff. A chance to do more than patch people up and send them back into the world. A chance to change something. I said yes without hesitation. The work was hard, harder than anything I'd done before. Late nights bled into early mornings, research papers piled up on my desk like a fortress I couldn't escape from. But I didn't care. Every hour I poured into that project felt like a brick in the foundation of something solid, something that was mine. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone else. Not Rachel, not Mom. Just me. And slowly, almost without realizing it, the exhaustion stopped feeling like defeat. It felt like purpose. It wasn't until weeks later, maybe months, time had started to blur together, that I heard about Rachel again. It came from Laura, of all people, during one of those awkward, too polite catch-ups over coffee. She leaned in across the small table, her voice low, like she wasn't sure if she should even say it. "Have you seen Rachel's Instagram?" I shook my head. I hadn't checked since that night. I didn't want to. I couldn't. Laura hesitated, chewing on her bottom lip before she pulled out her phone and slid it across the table. The screen lit up with Rachel's latest post, or, more accurately, the lack of one. Her account was practically a ghost town. No new photos, no flashy updates, no captions about chasing dreams. Just silence. And then Laura said it. I heard she lost her sponsorships. Word got out about, the money. People started dropping her fast. I think she even had to take a job somewhere. I stared at the screen, not really seeing it, not really knowing how to feel about it. Part of me wanted to be angry all over again, but another part, some quiet, exhausted part, just felt numb. It wasn't my responsibility anymore. A few more weeks passed before I saw Rachel for the first time since everything fell apart. I wasn't expecting it. I'd stopped by the grocery store after a long shift, still in my scrubs, too tired to think about anything beyond grabbing something for dinner. And there she was. She was standing behind the checkout counter, head down, scanning items with this small, practiced efficiency that didn't match the girl I used to know. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, and she wore that cheap red uniform that screamed minimum wage and long hours on tired feet. For a second, I didn't think she saw me. And maybe she didn't at first. But then her eyes lifted, and she froze. We just stood there, staring at each other, and I could see it all over her face. The shame, the exhaustion, the reality of where her choices had landed her. There was no sparkle in her eyes, no fake confidence. Just Rachel. Raw and small. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, barely, and moved on. The project at the clinic consumed me in the best way possible. Late nights filled with research, strategy meetings that stretched into the early hours of the morning, and long hours spent reviewing patient feedback and tweaking treatment models. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't just working, I was building something. And then, it happened. I was offered a promotion. Not just a small step forward, but something big, really big. The kind of opportunity that could change my entire career trajectory. I should have felt over the moon. Proud. Excited. But instead, all I felt was stillness. Because success, it turned out, didn't erase the damage. It didn't fix the loneliness that settled in after cutting people out of your life. It didn't erase the memories of carrying responsibilities that were never supposed to be mine. But it did give me something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. One night, months after everything had broken apart, Mom called. It wasn't anything dramatic, no tears, no guilt trips. Just her soft voice, asking if I might come over for dinner sometime. She sounded small, tentative, like she wasn't sure if I'd say yes. I said I'd think about it. It took another week before I finally found myself standing at their front door, my stomach twisted in knots. I didn't know what I expected, anger, awkwardness, maybe some cheap apology that would only dig the knife deeper. But when Rachel opened the door, everything inside me froze. She looked different. Smaller, thinner. Tired in a way that wasn't fake or exaggerated, just real. Life had knocked her down hard, and for the first time, it looked like she wasn't trying to hide it. "Hey," she said quietly. "Hey," I replied. No emotion. Just simple. Honest. Inside, the house felt different too, less like a battlefield, more like something tentative and fragile trying to rebuild itself. Mom sat at the table, a small, unsure smile on her face. "We're glad you came." I didn't say anything at first. Just sat down, letting the silence fill the space between us. Maybe forgiveness wasn't something that happened all at once. Maybe it wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic apologies. Maybe it was just this, showing up, broken and tired, and trying anyway. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. You think you're ready for forgiveness. You think it's this grand, sweeping moment, like in the movies, where someone says the right words, and suddenly, all that anger and hurt just melts away. But it doesn't. Real forgiveness is slower, quieter. It creeps in when you least expect it, soft and uncertain, like a thread you're not sure you're ready to pull. That's how it felt walking up to their front door again. It had been months since that first awkward dinner, months since I sat in that too familiar kitchen surrounded by too much silence and memories that still stung more than I wanted to admit. But now, something was different. The air didn't feel as heavy. The weight on my chest wasn't gone, but it wasn't crushing me anymore either. When Rachel opened the door this time, she didn't look surprised. She just nodded, stepping aside to let me in. No fake smiles. No forced cheerfulness. Just Rachel, stripped down to something raw and honest. Her eyes were tired but clearer than they'd been in a long time. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I replied, setting my coat down without waiting for an invitation. The small details mattered, the fact that I was there, that she was willing to open the door, that I didn't feel the need to run the second I crossed the threshold. The house was quieter than I remembered, but not in the suffocating way it used to be. There was something peaceful about it. The TV wasn't blaring in the background, and the air didn't carry that thick tension that made every conversation feel like walking on glass. We sat down at the table, just like last time. Mom was already there, fidgeting with a napkin, her hands trembling slightly. She looked healthier these days, her cheeks less hollow, her eyes a little brighter. She'd started volunteering at the local hospital, and for the first time in years, she seemed like she was trying. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Dinner was simple, nothing fancy, just pasta and a sad little salad that looked like someone tried. And honestly, it was the best meal I'd had in months because it didn't feel forced. No one was pretending to be okay, and no one was trying to patch over the cracks with fake apologies. Halfway through the meal, Rachel cleared her throat. "I got a second job," she said, not meeting my eyes. "At a diner. Nights and weekends." I didn't respond right away. I just let the words sit there, let her be uncomfortable with them. I wasn't going to hand her forgiveness like a gift wrapped in a pretty bow. She didn't deserve that yet. But hearing her say it, knowing she was trying, really trying, it mattered more than I expected it to. "That's good," I said finally, and I meant it. The rest of dinner passed quietly, and when I left, there was no dramatic goodbye, no awkward hugs. Just a simple nod between two people who didn't have the words yet but were trying to build something from the rubble. Weeks turned into months. Life didn't magically fix itself, and things weren't suddenly easy, but the edges softened. Work was steady, my promotion had stuck, and for the first time, I wasn't drowning under the weight of everyone else's expectations. I was actually starting to feel proud of what I was doing, of who I was becoming. And Rachel? She surprised me. One evening, out of nowhere, she showed up at my door. She looked uncomfortable, fidgety and awkward, like she wasn't sure why she was even there. "I wanted to give you this," she said, holding out a crumpled envelope. I didn't want to take it. I didn't want to look inside and see whatever half-hearted attempt she thought would fix things. But when I finally did, I found a small stack of cash. It wasn't much, probably barely a dent in what she owed me, but it was something. "I know it's not enough," she said quickly, avoiding my eyes. "It's just. I'm trying, Em. I don't expect you to believe me yet, but I am." And in that moment, something shifted. Not everything. Not completely. But enough. "Okay," I said quietly. "Keep trying." Forgiveness didn't come all at once. It wasn't a wave that washed over me. It was more like a stitch, pulling slowly, painfully, through fabric that had been torn apart. But every visit, every awkward conversation, every small effort, it added up. Mom was healing too, in her own quiet way. She started showing up for her volunteer shifts like clockwork, finding purpose in helping people who needed her. She wasn't the woman she used to be, But maybe that wasn't a bad thing. And me? I was learning to let go of the guilt that had wrapped itself around me for so long. I stopped answering every late-night phone call, stopped feeling responsible for fixing things I didn't break. I was finally building a life that belonged to me, one patient, one research breakthrough, one quiet evening at a time. Months later, I found myself back at their house for another dinner, this time without the heavy dread in my chest. Rachel had cooked, and Mom had actually laughed at something I said, her eyes crinkling at the corners the way they used to before everything fell apart. After dinner, as I was leaving, Rachel followed me to the door. She hesitated for a second before speaking. "I'm not there yet," she said quietly. "But I will be." I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, I believed her. "Me too," I said. And as I stepped out into the cool night air, it hit me, the realization that healing wasn't some finish line you crossed. It was a process. Messy. Imperfect. Full of backsteps and awkward starts. But sometimes, showing up was enough. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like hope.